I've spoken before on my qualms about the idea of thanking sacrifice, both in general and that of men in particular. I know that this is not a popular sort of thing for me to be saying, but I stand by my reasons for saying that because I define self sacrifice as a relinquishing of one's existence as an individual, exalted only because those that prefer parasitism over self-reliance and individualism market it as a virtuous quality. Therefore, I consider thanking sacrifice to be a sort of a sick act that turns the destruction of the individual into a virtue in itself. In other words, what good is the virtue of compassion if we can't arrange to have somebody destroyed to practice compassion on? If I do say so myself, it's a clever trick to uphold a collectivistic setup, and all in the name of service to others over self. It is precisely this standard that says that men are sacrificial, and the alleged gratitude thereof to encourage and quote unquote reward men for being so, that is the direct source of this phenomenon of male disposability. I consider this an aberration and not something normal and natural to the male or any human condition. But I will speak on more details on how that came to be, perhaps in a future video. Instead, in this video, I want to address two notions that I've noticed have sprung up in response to the idea of male disposability. One of them, that male disposability is something we should just resign to and accept. And two, that male disposability is a wrong way to interpret things. Regarding that first part, I realize that there are some out there that would just say, just suck it up and take it like a man at any given misfortune or hardship that befalls a man, because to do anything less amounts to a victimhood mentality, and advocating for it, for addressing the issue, is a victimhood mentality. Addressing the socially imposed standards of male disposability and expendability as they directly undermine the notion of male sovereignty and individualism is not good enough, and it still amounts to SJW-esque whining for these hard-ass type of people. Despite the fact that a man is often physically mutilated to the point of death and sheer non-existence from Earth, traditional conservatives seem to think that to voice concern about any of that is tantamount to the idiocy of social justice warriors. Got your foreskin brutally amputated at age 0? Take it like a fully grown man and stop being a victim, despite the fact that you are of no age to physically defend yourself. Just take it when you get fucked over in family courts over custody of your children. Just let it go when women are shouldered less to no consequences for the same crimes that men may commit. Say nothing when men are ultimately the ones that pay the taxes that benefit irresponsible women by law. These are what these tradcons casually end up advocating for, whether they mean to or not, for the passive submission of male kind to gynocentrist social tyranny and policy. Tradcons are only angry when we bring this up because they are shown how blatantly simpish they are for betraying their own sex if they are men, and they'd be angry because they have less of a case for taking advantage of men and just as less of a case for being the more valuable sex if they are women. Those that rely too much on evolutionary psychology are also those I accuse of promoting this sense of resignation to the idea of men as the disposable sex. Ironically enough, evolutionary psychology seems to be the quote-unquote science needed for today's traditionalists to justify themselves. Adherents of evolutionary psychology always going for about how men's alleged instinct for sacrifice so as to provide for women and protect them, and citing the need for a tribe to survive through its women over its men, they failed to provide a rational explanation, for that matter an explanation at all, about a morality that recognizes men as no less human and no less valuable than women. They haven't even tried, because their version of morality lies not in what transcends the conditioning of the ages, but instead in how humankind has convenienced itself in the name of collective survival. Taking the easy way out, I suppose. Now, I can't say that all supporters of evolutionary psychology think this way, but I also can't say that it's typical either. Now I want to pay particular attention to the second notion, those that say that male disposability doesn't even exist or is a misnomer. The argument is as follows. No, men are not treated as disposable because even though they die in wars, make up the primary numbers for the physical workforce, we still appreciate them. We thank our men for sacrificing themselves. We mourn their deaths, and we honor them after death. You already know my position about thanking sacrifice, so I don't really need to go into it. But since it's a subject that I feel too strongly not to shut up about it, I will. Thanking a man for his sacrifice is tantamount to celebrating anything from a man's loss of something he values to ending his life. You know, I'm not a misanthrope. I'm anti-misanthropy, to be more specific. But nothing tempts me to go full black pill misanthrope like a planet-wide orgy of thanking and reaping the benefits off of another's sacrifice for the greater good. I'm moving on, lest I spiral into a tangent about that shit. Biting some ice. Regarding the mourning of men who die in service to society. One would think that mourning is a sentiment regarding one whose departure from the world causes anguish. In other words, the mourned individual in question, man or woman, is valued in life, making his or her death a tragedy. Surely not even I would say that men's lives aren't valued, for mourning for men does happen in these cases, signifying that their lives are valued. However, grief is not a matter of social customs, protocols, and expectations. Grief and mourning are both a phenomenon involving emotions laid raw. For those experiencing this, it can be incredibly hard to hold back, and it's a clear indicator of one's measure of value for the departed one in question. This is not proof that the standard male disposability doesn't exist and is not actively imposed. Rather, this is proof that male disposability is nothing virtuous nor desirable, as it robs valuable men of their agency and often their life. We say we mourn our men, and no doubt we've lost count as to how many times we had to keep on doing this. I say disproportionately, sometimes at relatively young ages. Again, mourning is not an argument that proves that society doesn't treat men expendably. No amount of mourning and grief has managed to stop men being treated as the less valuable sex. The sex of less concern when a tragedy happens upon his person, that the same tragedy upon the woman would garner more global sentiment and initiatives to stop this oppression, as if every woman undergoes it in their daily lives. And mourning is proof that this male disposability is wrong to inflict, not wrong to conclude as a prevailing societal norm that needs to be corrected. Lastly, regarding honoring sacrificed men, this is the sort of thing I put in the same ballpark as thanking men's sacrifice. And I accuse this sort of thing as being an incentive for men to relinquish their lives in exchange for some benefits. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. But benefits are usually promised even if the man in question may not even be around to reap them. This is justified with altruist morality that places value not on personal gain, but its opposite. Service to others, for the sake of service to others, is the virtue to be then upheld in order to make gynocentrism and its pit bull, male disposability, to work. Thanking and honoring the disposal of men places value in the destruction of men as a virtue in itself. It does not value men for living for their own sake. It does not value men for being alive, altogether, with the notable exception that in order to get oneself killed, one must have lived first. It most certainly doesn't value men for being equally human as women. It definitely is not a counter-argument against the notion that male disposability is a real social phenomenon. It doesn't deserve to exist and should be identified and fought at every turn. But it's not proof that it isn't the status quo today. It's still male disposability, no matter how much it's thanked. It's still male disposability no matter how much we claim to honor those we expect to die so others can reap the benefits of this death. It's still male disposability no matter how much we mourn those that went along with society's rules to have themselves offed because they are the men. Meaning of life for men, pinnacle of masculinity, it all sounds like the biggest shit test in the universe to me. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you derived some kind of value from it. If you did, please consider backing me on my Subscribestar account. Any amount will really help me make more videos and improve quality, and I've had exciting perks for being a subscriber in store for you as well.